Yeah, let the big dog hunt. Hello again, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Kallas Remarks with your host, Joe Staszak, co-host Steve Kallas, Johnnie Kallas, special guest. Joining us, as he usually does, crunch time, playoff time, championship weekend is upon us. 2 games left, 3 games left in the season, unfortunately, but should be a good weekend. Fellas, how you doing?
Good to be with you guys.
You too, bro.
Same here.
Well, let's start with the Birds. It's a 3 o'clock game. The Commanders, obviously a great storyline with a rookie quarterback like Jaden Daniels and tearing it up. Went in, dropped 45 on Detroit, and won in Tampa. So has won 2 road games. Doesn't seem to get phased by the moment. Moment's getting a little bigger, but again, I don't see that being a problem for him. Let's start with you, Steve. The thoughts on this game. The last time they faced Jalen Hurts, it was the one game this year he didn't until the last 2 games. He didn't start and finish. They got off to a good start. He got hurt with a concussion. Commanders turned it over 5 times, won the game in the last 16 seconds on a Jamison Crowder touchdown from Jane Daniels. He threw 5 touchdowns. I wouldn't say that was his coming out party. It was one of his coming out parties because he's done a lot of crazy things this year and he's just been so impressive. Your thoughts on this game?
Well, this is a rookie who completed 81% of his passes in the first 4 games. It's the longest streak of any quarterback ever, not just a rookie. But the interesting thing to me is, and I'll go back to yesterday, maybe you saw this, Joe. Sal Powell was at the Eagles practice. He had video from early in the practice. Today, what did everybody say? Oh, full of practice yesterday, full practice. And the video that Sal Powell had, even he said he was that Hertz was, quote, trying to get ready to go, close quote. And then at the end of his analysis, now he wasn't there for the whole practice because he was actually giving a report to Sports Center or whatever was on then. And he said, quote, Hertz will have got to move a lot better than I saw today. So that's pretty interesting. And I don't know, not that you're going to go out of the way to hurt a guy, but they're going to try and nail him if he starts to run, as you should any quarterback, by the way. Just seems to be a weakness. Maybe you're afraid to get a penalty. Um, but I'm not convinced that Hertz is, you're probably in it more than me. I'm not convinced that Hertz is 100%. I don't know then if they're going to, stack the box just to try and stop Barkley. Will Hurts fake to Barkley and then run 30 yards or 40 yards for a touchdown as he's done before? If he's able to run, and then everybody will say, oh, everything seems okay with Hurts's knee. So I think that's a big deal. As I said to you beforehand, Goddard didn't practice on Thursday. Jurgens didn't practice on Thursday. And we'll see. You said Jurgens has a back injury, and that's a problem. So there seem to be some problems with the Eagles that I don't think the Commanders have. The other thing I'll say, I think it's true that you can argue. I'm trying to remember Dan Marino, his rookie year, but you can argue that this guy, that Daniels is the best rookie quarterback first year ever in the
Ever.
history of football. That's not a crazy statement. But I always go back to Dan Orlovsky, and I always say the same thing. I'm really on the fence on Dan Orlovsky. He's an expert, just ask him. But 3 times yesterday, he said it'll be a colossal failure if the Eagles lose. Now, I don't know, was it a colossal failure last week? I mean, a bunch of us, especially Johnny Callis, thought the Commanders could beat the Lions. And to me, that's a reality. It's a possibility. Can the Commanders? So he goes 3 times. He's a rookie quarterback. He's a rookie quarterback. He's a rookie quarterback. He's not a rookie quarterback. This guy's like an old pro already. So I don't buy into that. Will it be a colossal failure? I think if the Commanders beat the Lions, they can beat the Eagles, although correctly you will say, well, the Eagles are a lot better defensively. First in points per game allowed, 17.6. First in yards per game allowed, 286. First in yards per play allowed, 4.8. I mean, those are incredible numbers. But I also don't know if they've really faced a quarterback like Daniels. Because frankly, last week, look, I didn't think he ran well at all last week. He had 18 carries for 51 yards. They seem to have a couple of DBs who could run with him in the backfield. So I don't know what's going to happen there with this group, but I think if Daniels can run like Daniels can run, I kind of like him with 6.5 points, but I think they have a chance to win the game outright as well.
81 yards you had against the Eagles last time. They can't go man under coverage. You're going to have to play some zone. You turn your back on them. And there was a 4th and 11 play where he ran for 29 yards, kind of turned that game around. But I don't think he had to do a ton of running against Detroit. I mean, and they were down 13 starters. Like he gashed them. And even on the ground, it was like 12 yards of play, it seemed like. Conversely, Detroit, Jamar Gibbs seemed like ran the ball like 13 yards a clip. To me, it's the defense of the Commanders that I think is going to be their issue. They've given up 30 points a game in the playoffs so far. Johnny, your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, the Eagles play such a different brand of football than the Lions do when thinking about the Commanders' opponents, and it's a brand of football much more susceptible to, emerging victorious in the postseason. They run the ball really well. They don't turn the ball over. They play excellent defense and force a lot of turnovers. I thought the Commanders, the big opportunity for them, obviously, is the fact that everybody was focusing on one side of the football when analyzing the Lions. I mean, their defense was obliterated with injuries, and the Commanders made them show for it. That's not the case this week. So I think, the Hurts injury potentially is significant, but let's be honest, you guys, the Eagles so far have not relied overwhelmingly on Jalen Hurts to have success in the postseason. They're a run-first football team. What they have relied on Hurts to do, and Joe, you pointed this out in some of the articles you've written, is not turn the ball over. They've obviously adopted an incredibly conservative approach to their passing game. They did throw the ball down the field one time that I remember, and AJ just dropped it last
Dropped
week.
it.
So you can't have that in a championship game. You're not necessarily going to get away with that. But what the Commanders need to do, you're right. The opportunity the Eagles have is obviously against the Commanders' defense. The Commanders need to, first of all, yes, put a lot of guys in the box, but don't give them one of these like the Rams did, single high safety looks where if Barkley breaks through the initial line of defenders, he's gone. He's one-on-one with the safety and then hits the home run ball. If I'm the Commanders, if you give up 5, 6 yards a clip to Barkley, make sure it's not from a couple of home run balls. Force them to score in the red zone. Force them to score touchdowns in the red zone. It's something the Eagles have not done a ton of. They certainly did not have any success doing it last week against the Rams. They hit 3 home run balls for touchdowns. Otherwise, they were kicking field goals. So if I'm the Commanders, obviously the Eagles, especially Barkley's going to be able to run the ball. He ran the ball. I think he may have had 200 and then 150 against them during the regular season. But I'm preventing those home run balls to the best of my ability. I'm not playing these single high safety looks where Barkley can hit the home run ball if he gets beyond the initial line of scrimmage. And I'm forcing them to convert in the end zone. But then on the flip side, obviously, what the Eagles need to contend with is a quarterback that's not only playing out of his mind, but unlike the last time they played against him when the Commanders still won, isn't turning the ball over. The Eagles really have, relied on a heavy turnover margin victory in their first 2 games here, turning the ball over multiple times against the Packers and the Rams. And at least against the Rams, barely coming away to play another week, so to speak. So I think the difference with Daniels is obviously he has all this poise. He's playing like a veteran quarterback, everything that Steve said. The reason that I like them, at least with the points in this game, is when I think of the best player on each team, Daniels and Barkley. Daniels is touching that ball every play, every play. Barkley's not as good as Barkley is, and the game was out of Barkley's hands last week. So I think by that logic alone, I give the Commanders an edge, at least with the point spread. I will say there is one, to me, huge potential injury, and it's not even Jalen Hurts. The Commanders last week lost their best interior lineman, Sam Cosmi, to an ACL. He was going to match up with Jalen Carter. That's kind of a problem. But it's the old in Jaden you trust if you've been riding with the Commanders the last couple of weeks, and I think this has a chance to be a really good championship game.
I think
Yeah,
you're
I'm
going to see.
glad,
Go
Joe,
ahead.
I'm glad Johnny mentioned Cosme because I think now what they have to do is I think they're going to have to keep a back end specifically wherever, well, I assume Carter lines up where he lines up, and I assume you're going to need a running back in there because I don't know any sub. Cosme's really, really good. Read a couple articles about him, and a lot of people think he should have been an all-pro. And so, as Johnny said, he's the best of their interior linemen, but he's facing the best of the Eagles, who was a beast last week as well. And I think that's going to be a problem. But again, you rely on Daniels. Maybe he'll move to his left a little bit, knowing right off the bat, or he's going to keep a running back in to help him out.
In my estimation and my prediction is it's AJ Brown's the key to this game. I mean, you can do what you want with Barkley and whatnot. 3 catches for 25 yards. He knows that's not acceptable. He does it. He catches that touchdown pass. He also dropped one on a dig route early in the game, which would have extended a drive. Jalen's numbers are different. The game's different. It plays out differently. He doesn't drop balls too much. He's got to kind of channel his outer excellence in this game. I think he will. I think they're going to come out and throw a little bit more than they did. If Jalen doesn't go down that last game, they really had a it looked like that game was going to be a very crisp game, 60 minutes, which Eagles haven't played really one this year. Saquon had 109 yards in the first quarter, and then he had 1.7 yards per carry after Jalen went out. So obviously Washington played him a little differently. But Johnny, I think you're right. Without that, when they you do that single safety high, Eagles love when teams stack the box because if you can get through that first initial wave, goodbye. You're not catching them. And they take bad, even take a great angle. It doesn't matter. He's gone. So I think that's fine with the Eagles, but I think it's going to be interesting. I think AJ is going to have a big game, well, and Smitty as well. But I think
And
it's going to
and
surprise people.
if I could give you one more stat,
Sure.
Washington in the playoffs, the Commanders in the playoffs are 6 for 9 on fourth down, and that led to 35 points, which is 5 touchdowns out of the 6 times they went for fourth down.
Oh,
So, which means, Quinn's like another guy. He's I think a little smarter than Campbell. Not that Campbell really hurt them; they just got beat last week. But I think that's something to watch too, because they're going to go. They're going to try.
And they've been very successful. That's a good stat. All right, let's talk about the other game. Kansas City and Buffalo. I don't think Allen's thinking about his legacy. I think he's thinking about progressions and how they're going to beat the Chiefs. Say what you want about him. He's had a great year. I don't think it's going to take anything away if you lose it at Arrowhead. But the Chiefs are playing good ball, no turnovers. Lost one game outside of the Carson Wentz game since last Christmas. That's like 13 months ago. They're hard to beat. They're hard to kill. Patrick's Patrick, and until he's knocked off, he's still to me the odds-on favorite and the Chiefs to win the Super Bowl. Johnny, your thoughts on this one? As Buffalo goes in as a 2-point underdog, they're the only team that has beaten KC this year. Of course, it was at Buffalo, and it was a long time ago.
yeah, I think it's interesting. Usually the all the pressure in these championship games, like in the Eagles game, is on the home team. And that can I actually heard Belichick say this earlier in the week. That can provide a little bit of a disadvantage because you're in the championship round, you're playing another excellent team and who's kind of playing with house money. Certainly the case in sort of the Eagles Commanders dynamic, right? To me, I don't think this is the case here, you guys. I think I understand what you're saying that Allen himself probably is not thinking about legacy, but the reality is the Bills have done exceptionally well against the Chiefs in the regular season and are 0-3 in the last 4 years against the Chiefs in the postseason. And you lose this game, you go to 0-4. I mean, I'm not saying that's the equivalent of losing 4 Super Bowls in a row, obviously, but it does bring home memories
Sure.
that era in Buffalo where you just can't get over Kansas City when it's clear you have the capability. It's not like these teams are wildly, unmatched against each other. It's clear you have the capability to beat them on any given Sunday. You've done so in the regular season. So, despite the Chiefs being the team that should have all the pressure in the world on them, they're going for the first three-peat in NFL history. I actually think all the pressure is on the visiting team, which is rare in these situations, Buffalo, because they have, lost so many times in such heartbreaking fashion, frankly. Bass missing a field goal that could have sent it to overtime, the crazy, 13
13
game a
seconds. Yeah.
couple of years ago. Um, and I think the other reality is, I said this last week, look at health, look at team health, the Kansas City Chiefs somehow, it seems like this every year, are incredibly healthy for this time of the year, including their three best players, Patrick Mahomes, Travis Kelce, who has to be among the most durable position players in the history of the game, and Chris Jones. And the Bills have a big issue with Taylor Rapp, their very good safety, potentially. I don't think it's been confirmed yet, but potentially being out for this one. Obviously, you want to have a good safety position against Kansas City. So I think these are two evenly matched teams. I kind of like what the Bills have done this year, right? They were heavily reliant on guys like Diggs and Gabe Davis in years past. Now they have a very good running game through James Cook. Allen can move the ball with his legs. They don't have receivers who are necessarily household names, but they sort of get the job done. I think they have the formula certainly to beat the Chiefs, to control the time of possession, which I think is so crucial in this one. And the Chiefs have always looked vulnerable. I mean, they're the most vulnerable looking, I say 15 and 1. I don't count that last game. 15 and 1 team in NFL history, but they always seem to get it done, especially in one possession games. So until the Bills beat them, as much as I'd like to see them win, I mean, I'm rooting hard for Buffalo. I'm going with my head, not my heart. I think this one's for Kansas City.
Okay, Steven.
I'll just add to Johnny with Taylor Rapp. Christian Benford is in concussion protocol as of yesterday still. And if they lose a safety and they lose a corner, that's a problem. The problem with looking at the Chiefs, and we talk about this every year, certainly last year for sure, oh, how do they do it? They just look like they do. But now, you've got 43 guys who have played in the conference championship game for the Chiefs. And I'm going to guess a lot of them have also obviously played in the Super Bowl, where there's only, I've heard between 12 and 14 for the Bills. And I think that's a big, big difference. And you got Andy Reid and Spags, and they've been through it before. Although I will say this, I thought Matt Milano last week did a pretty good job as a spy on Lamar. And apparently he might be the spy on Mahomes. And if Mahomes can't do it with his legs, because he always seems to do it in his legs in a big spot, not for 30 yards downfield, but you need 3rd and 8 or whatever it is. And he just seems has an uncanny ability to make the big play. He might be the best ever at that. Maybe Brady, maybe him in singular plays. The other thing I wanted to point out, and this is what I saw on Get Out this morning. So the Bills, who, yes, beat the Chiefs 30-21, they played 4 other teams who are in the playoffs. The Ravens early on scored 35 on them. The Texans scored 23 on them. And then don't forget, this is December 8th and December 15th now. This is not early in the season. You had the Rams scored 44 and the Lions scored 42.
Yep.
So when you look at that, that's an average of 36. These are the road games. Obviously, they beat the Chiefs in Buffalo. These are the road games. That's 36 points per game against every playoff team that they faced on the road. And so that's got to give you pause. The other thing I'll say, though, is I really thought Hollywood Brown and Hopkins would help. Last week, they were non-existent. Kelsey was Kelsey. I don't know if he can do that again. Maybe he can. If he can, I think the Bills are in trouble. But Kelsey, to me, hasn't really been Kelsey all year. You could argue Mahomes hasn't even been Mahomes all year, except he does what he has to do to win the game. And there's nobody in the game like him with that kind of stuff. It's so far back to second, I can't even tell you who it is. Maybe it's Allen, maybe it's Lamar. But I think Johnny pointed out, they're 0-3 in the playoffs. And I wonder if that 13-second game, that's 2021. I wonder if that's in the back of their minds after losing that game. And I don't know that it affected them last year. I mean, they put up the stats on Allen like they were really good last year. 26 for 39. Yeah, that's good. But for 186 yards, I'm trying to do the math in my head. And what is that? That's 7 or 8 yards a completion. So I don't think that's going to get it myself. The final thing I'll say is Pacheco healthy? He's come back, but to me, he hasn't looked like Pacheco. He runs 3 or 4 yards. The first guy hits him, he drags him 2 more yards. That's what he does. Last year against the Bills, he had 97 rushing yards and a touchdown. This is the kind of thing. Can they run the ball? Because then that will open things up. And Xavier Worthy has made some. He's not just the speed burner now. He's become the second guy to Kelsey. I don't know if Hollywood Brown is going to play a lot. The 2 games he played before, he was pretty good. And D. Hopkins, I don't know if he's going to play a lot, but now it seems to be Kelsey Worthy is the hierarchy. And we'll see what happens. I'm kind of like Johnny. I learned my lesson last year when I picked the Ravens over the Chiefs. And I won't pick against the Chiefs until they're beaten. If they get beat today, then maybe next year I won't pick them as surely.
All
Could I
right.
just
Well, go ahead,
Joe,
Joe.
could I just add one more thing?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I should have mentioned the other way you have to look at this game. These are like two divisional matchups. I mean, the Chiefs and Bills play each other effectively twice a year. It reminds me of those, Brady Manning Patriot Colts
Sure.
rivalry. These guys know each other really well. You're not going to see a ton of surprises. And to Steve's point, I think if you're the Bills in big play situations, you need to just take Kelsey out the game. If Hopkins or Hollywood Brown or even Xavier Worthy beats you one-on-one and they win the game that way, so be it. And
Bad.
the last thing I'll say, because I remember in the Super Bowl last year, it came down to this. You have a gotta have it fourth and one play, fourth and two play, fourth and three play, which could very well happen in this game. You better eye in on these quarterbacks, man, because they're not handing the ball off.
Right.
You better eye in on Allen. You better eye in on Mahomes. The ball's not leaving their hand unless they throw it to somebody. So I think those are other key important parts of the game.
Good points. All right, so let's do picks. Steve, we'll start with you. Just two games this week.
3-1 last week. I know I don't compare with Johnny over 2 weeks, but I'm taking the Chiefs on FanDuel are -1.5. I'll take the Chiefs. I understand the Bills can absolutely win, and I'm going to take again on FanDuel the Commanders are getting 6.5. I'll take the 6.5. I'd be surprised if they beat the Eagles, but can they beat the Eagles? Absolutely, they can. Uh, because of Johnny last week, we weren't surprised that they beat the Lions because that I don't want to say it was a beatdown, but it was every play was like with no defense. I'll say this: I think the Eagles game might be an over game because I don't know that they're going to be able to stop Saquon and the Eagles. But I think Daniels is going to get his, and that says high scoring to me. Chiefs and Bills is kind of a different thing, so I'm on the fence on that. I think they're both 47.5. Um, but I thought the Lions Commanders would be an over game, and I think it was over by halftime from a points perspective or early third quarter.
Johnny.
Like father, like son this week. You give me 6.5 points with Jaden Daniels as a quarterback, taking it every time. So I'll take the 6.5 or 6.5, whatever it is with the Commanders. And then yeah, look, I would love to see Buffalo win. So I'm viewing this as a win-win. I'm taking the Chiefs -1.5. I'm hoping for Buffalo. If the Chiefs win by one, man, am I going to be pissed off?
Could very well happen. They like winning those close ones. That's a lot of points, to be honest, with the Jaden Daniels thing. Although when everyone loves, they think he's going to explode. I think it's going to be one of those games where there's going to be turnovers, and it's not going to go the way that as expected by most. Yes, they can keep it close, and the Eagles do kind of, take their foot off the gas sometimes and give up some back doors. But I think this is one game where they play a full 60 minutes, and I think the passing game is going to come into effect. I'm going to go with the Eagles in this one, minus the points, and I just can't take Buffalo, even though I'd love to see them knock off the Chiefs. I've been burned so many times by Mahomes. Steve will tell you. So I'm going to go with Patrick. If it doesn't happen, win-win. I'm great with Buffalo winning. I'd much rather see them in the Super Bowl if the Eagles get there. I don't really want anything to do with the Chiefs anymore. I'm done with them. I remember 2 years ago it didn't go too well. So I don't. I would rather play Buffalo. I don't think they're as good as a team as the Chiefs, but anything can happen the way they're playing. But you're right, Steve. You brought up the point about their defense. He's given up. They've gotten gashed in a lot of games. I don't know if it's going to be this one because the Chiefs don't really score a lot of points, but I'm going with the Chiefs in a close one in Arrowhead just by principle. I'm taking them home, so I'm going Chiefs, and I'm going against you guys. I'm taking the Eagles in the other game. We shall see, fellas. We'll be back Monday to recap, and then we're going to talk some Super Bowl because that's the only game left. The only game left, 2 weeks to go in New Orleans. You can catch Steve's stuff on his daily Facebook forum page, Speaking of Sports with Steve Kallas, his videos on WestchesterCountyPost.com, this podcast on YouTube and all the audio outlets, Spotify and Apple. Johnny, appreciate you coming on, man. Hope you can join us the rest of the way.
Looking forward to it. Thanks, fellas.
You got it, bud. Great stuff by both of you guys. Thanks for watching, folks, and catch you on Monday. Enjoy the games.
Always a pleasure.
You too, bud.